9/11 was an attack on human consciousness.
I want a good answer for why you silently banned me just for sharing evidence.
There is no need for another conspiracy than the one that destroyed the educational system.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be here in Toronto and at the Toronto hearings, where we've assembled to look at the evidence, package it, and make sure it gets used by the media, by governments, and by individuals all around the world. I represent 1,550 architects and engineers now, calling for a new investigation of the destruction of these towers. Why? Because the evidence shows, and as I believe you'll see today, that all three skyscrapers were destroyed by explosive controlled demolition. How do we know that? Because we are using the scientific method to figure out what happened that day. We have visual evidence that there's extreme explosive forces at play in the Twin Towers, hurling without regard to public safety. Or the care of the surrounding buildings, many of which were quite destroyed. And the question is, why did they do it that way? My speculation, and it's just that, is that they didn't have access to the perimeter columns as much, perhaps. So they had to have enough explosive force to take out not only the core columns, but the floors and everything else in the building.
A 110-story building above us, and I'm looking up at the sun.
And a split second later, I opened up my eyes, and I was just sitting there, totally numb, looking up at blue sky. Then it got dark from the smoke and everything, and I started to cough. I started to feel pain in my leg, and I said, I couldn't even believe at that point that I was alive, and I survived that, and there was nothing above me.
I hope you've got your critical thinking hat on, students.
They had to have enough explosive force to take out not only the core columns, but the floors and everything else in the building.
Thermite burns so incredibly hot that it can melt straight through the engine block of a car.
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong.
Everybody clamors, Dr. Wood, for a new investigation. We're not going to get it from the government, but we need an independent entity to do it, and Dr. Wood is as independent as you can be. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. It is as independent as it can be, and that is the problem. By design, they don't want it to be independent. They just want to call for an independent investigation because it sounds right. And most of the people who are members of the 9/11 Truth Movement, the so-called Truth Movement, I think are there for good, well-meaning purposes, but they get hoodwinked and derailed, and a con job pulled on them, and they buy into it and they become invested in it, and they're taught to memorize this list of talking points that are just drilled in. Like this idea about thermite. Sure, there's aluminum dust and iron dust, but what does that have to do with what happened to the buildings? I've yet to see any connection with that. And even Niels Harrit, who was the first author on that, quote, peer-reviewed thermite paper, says that we shouldn't speculate on how it was used. None of the authors can agree on what it was used for. They don't know. So if they don't know, then you need to show a cause and effect.
And I have to put myself once again in the shoes of some of the truthers out there. Look, I was there. I was with you. I was repeating the same script for quite some time. I remember when I woke up about 9/11, I was looking for the alternative media to guide me because that was the only information that I was being exposed to. But then I was exposed to Dr. Wood. It was another perspective.
And you were open to it.
I was open to it because I'm an open-minded person by nature. I'm claustrophobic, Dr. Wood, by nature, mentally. If I feel I'm in a corner and this is what I have to learn and I'm not allowed to step outside those boundaries, I rebel. I can't. It's just the way I'm designed. That's why I discuss so many topics, because I want to be exposed to everything, because everything is interconnected.
Exactly. That's life.
Yes.
That's what I was saying about, cats and birds and so forth. It's being able to experience life. Otherwise, we're just robots if we're not living life and thinking and feeling and interacting with life.
When somebody tells you, don't look that way, well, guess what? I used to not look that way, but now I do.
I supported this organization and I'm a big fan of it, but I found out there was all this evidence that you weren't talking about. There's
evidence such as the New York City seismographic data, the University of Alaska magnetometer data, the New York Police Department forensic study that found only one file cabinet of the thousands. The rest of them were missing, and the one remaining file cabinet showed severe metal distortion, almost like it had been warped in some way. The undamaged bathtub beneath World Trade Center, the trains that were down there, the PATH trains, all this information that's easily verifiable. And I was wondering why you weren't talking about it, and I was really concerned, and I only mentioned a couple things. There are hundreds and hundreds of things, and so I wanted to message you and see if you had heard of them. And because the scientist that found all this information is also a scientist like you, her name's Dr. Judy Wood. She's a PhD scientist, got her degree in materials science engineering from Virginia Polytechnic Institute. I thought you would really want to know about this. So
yeah, this is really important.
So
let me address the issue. There
I didn't
is
ask my question though.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, basically, I found out that she took legal action too with all this information, and so I sent you the question in an email if you had heard about any of this evidence and why you weren't talking about it. But you banned me from your petition. Mr. Gage, why don't you mention any of the large sum of very important empirical evidence from 9/11 on your website or in the presentations?
A quick summary is that the buildings didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground, but they turned into dust in midair. How do I know that? Because if they had collapsed to the ground, you'd have a pile of debris that would correspond to 210-story buildings. That didn't happen. Lower Manhattan would have been flooded due to a broken bathtub, the dike that holds out the Hudson River. Few people realize that the towers were built in the Hudson River. And the bedrock is 70 feet below the water table. So there's this dike, they call the bathtub or slurry wall, that holds out the Hudson River. If you crash down two 500,000-ton buildings onto the bathtub, it would have ruptured and flooded the subway tunnels, the PATH train tunnels. That didn't happen. As a matter of fact, when they took down the remains of Building 6, they used a cable to pull it down because they were afraid to use explosives. And this was a 6-story building. It was just this little clump left. And the other way I know that it wasn't that buildings turned to dust, just the simple way, is that if the buildings had collapsed to the ground, they'd make a thud, and the seismic signal that was recorded did not correspond to the size of the buildings. The seismic signal corresponded to a 16-story building or a 20-story building, not 110-story buildings.
I don't understand the seismographic data. I haven't studied it.
I've seen collapses and demolition buildings, but nothing like this. Was unbelievable. Like I said, there wasn't a door, there wasn't anything to be found. It was all disintegrated, all rubble. Concrete was small little pieces, not even slabs. No desk, no furniture, no computers, no phones, no anything. So I imagine the people were the same as the building, nothing left.
Look at the cover of my book. What it shows, it's undeniable to anyone who looks at it. The building is just frothing up into dust.
I was a supporter of Architects and Engineers 9/11 Truth for a long time. Came across the work of Dr. Judy Wood in her book, Where Did the Towers Go? First, by hearing Jesse Ventura on your show, I believe in 2011, mention her name. Her work is astounding, and the evidence shows that thermal and kinetic means were not employed in the destruction of the World Trade Center complex. Richter scale data is enough in itself. It shows that there were no...
Sure, so what's your question?
If you would have her on, and regardless of where you stand, if you'd have her on and have yourself...
Sure. Let me answer that question. and I appreciate your call. I am the founder of questioning 9/11. I mean, there was NORAD stand down. The hijackers were trained at U.S. bases. That's Sacramento Bee, Associated Press. That means I question there needs to be a real investigation. You know, Bush and Cheney weren't under oath, blah, blah, blah.
There's a whole lot of evidence and very weird things that happen at the World Trade Center. Okay, there are about 10,000 file cabinets that are missing. There's about 20,000 floor trusses and 220 acres of metal decking that's missing. The question is, where did it go?
They then turn that into, Alex says, like Wile E. Coyote, Bush blew up the towers. So then again, they misrepresent. I say, hey.
Now, we don't know much about weapons that we don't know much about, right? Now, we don't know much about weapons that we don't know much about, right? They're not, we don't have the understanding of what else might be available, given that it's not public information. So what we do at Architects and Engineers for Nine Truth is present in the limited time that we have the most solid scientific forensic data that we can give you, that you can take to the American people, your friends, neighbors, colleagues, architects, engineers, government officials, and media representatives, and that they won't think you are a kook. Okay, this is solid evidence that we present. Now, I'm not going to present every piece of evidence out there that I can't explain.
Well, there's this guy named Nikola Tesla that we don't learn much about in high school. Well, John Hutchison wanted to replicate some of Tesla's work. He can reproduce all of these effects. You know, the same thing we saw on 9/11. Look at these jellification, kind of weird things, and the two in the top are from the WTC, and the two in the bottom are from John Hutchison. The same kind of curly metal that's, and while the gizmos turn on, it's like Jell-O without heat.
Get it. This used to be the, oh my mercy. 7 long, just under 2 inch by 2 inch, solid block of iron.
It's like the molecules have let go of each other.
I found it hard to believe that it actually bent because of the size of it and how there's no cracks in the iron. It bent without almost a single crack in it. It takes thousands of degrees to bend steel like this.
Typically you'd have buckling and tearing on the tension side, but there's no buckling at all.
And architects, engineers, people who work with steel, welders have just never seen the level of destruction and the level of deformation of this material in our lives.
It's like the molecules have let go of each other. This was in Baker's Trust, which was across the street from Tower 2. That's pretty weird. How do you get it to bend like that?
What turns people off on looking at my work is all these rumors of ray beams from space or space beams.
Dr. Wood says maybe there's a beam of laser or microwave from space or something.
Which I don't ever talk about.
I don't talk about the buildings as much anymore. I will talk about the issues that I'm more interested in, and Dr. Judy Wood is not one of them. This is a GRTV feature interview with our special guests, William Binney and Richard Gage. First of all, Richard, obviously my regular listeners will be familiar with yourself and your organization, but there's always new listeners joining in. Why don't you just explain to us what Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is?
It's amazing that they would delete someone's account completely to prevent them from sharing facts before they ever even had shared those facts.
Why didn't you take all this smoking gun evidence, such as the thermite that's supposedly peer-reviewed? Why did you never file that in a court of law? Yet Dr. Judy Wood took all the evidence, just a brief sum that I mentioned.
I'm an
and
architect.
she filed that in a court of law,
Okay.
and it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court in October of 2009. So why have you never filed this evidence in a court of law to pursue NIST and the people that engaged with NIST in the conflict of interest relationship to use our tax dollars for those phony 9/11 investigations?
This is an important discussion. I'm just trying to kind of carry it along so others have an opportunity, and I don't want to cut you short. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. We're architects and engineers. We have produced the evidence. It's available for you to file it, to do whatever you want with it. Make it happen. I'm working 80 hours a week, harder than I've ever worked in my life. I'm managing a large organization of 40 volunteers with almost no funding. And I don't have time to sleep, much less file lawsuits. I don't even know how to do that.
And one thing I just noticed here on their website, it says they're a 501c3 nonprofit organization.
That means they can't lobby Congress for a new investigation.
That's what my next question was. Does that mean, I know they're religious groups.
Yes.
Religious groups cannot criticize the government from the pulpit if they're a 501c3. Is that correct, Deanna?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, good. I guess that answered some questions there.
Yes.
I have an important question to ask you. Is there a reason why AE 9/11 Truth or the 9/11 Scholars or all these other, Grand Poobah organizations, is there a reason why they haven't filed in the court system anything about nanothermite?
Well, it come down to several things. Remember, I said that I filed a request for correction to NIST and became a whistleblower in doing that.
Right.
Because I submitted my evidence to a government agency. And right after that, that was when the AE, about 3.5 weeks after that, is when the AE 9/11 Truth's website first went up. After I submitted that request for correction to NIST, and then they submitted theirs, but theirs didn't have anything about thermite in it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a submission to a government agency, and at the time they were whining that I was an op and so forth, and the evidence shows the reverse because. If you it's a felony to defraud the government.
Mm-hmm.
But you wonder, okay, what are all the reasons you can think of why they wouldn't have anything about thermite in their request for correction to NIST? They basically were saying you have great data, you just need a little bit more of it. It was pretty benign.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and so why wouldn't they have put thermite in there or molten metal? The two hallmark things that they talk about. And I could only think of 3 reasons. 1, they really don't think it's important. 2, they know it's a crime to defraud the government. Number 3, they know it's treason if done so by someone who works for another government agency, because that's doing psyops on a government agency. That's attacking the government.
Right. So there's a good reason why they don't do this.
Can you think of another reason?
No, I certainly can't.
Some of these cars, this toasted, where they're not so warped, that would be explained, I would think, by falling molten iron droplets, which is what you have. Right.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. I just buried him sick. I'm sorry I came down. I just had to help people.
I want to go with, hey, they said they blew up Building 7. We have scores of newscasts saying they blew it up.
Oh, God. It is black as night and I'm outside in broad daylight.
Her book is a joke. It's mostly padding.
People can debate and argue all day at 9/11 Truth what they think happened. Not Judy Wood, and I've let Ventura come on and promote her. Where did 3,000 toilets go?
I just learned there were 1,400 cars toasted that day all over the streets of Manhattan.
No, that's right. The cars that didn't have anything fall on them were completely fried, but expanding, just like a secret helicopter reportedly crashed.
Right. Well, what does that dust baggie have to do with what happened to the building?
Exactly.
That connection was never made.
No, it wasn't.
And I think that's not referring to these two particular cases of directed energy or high-powered microwave, but sure.
I'm just going to jump onto the boat and take that thing to Jersey, because no one wants to blow up Jersey.
They get what they pay for, sort of.
I think the lack of artifacts stands out to me quite a bit. I think the fact that I haven't seen a door, I haven't seen a phone, I haven't seen a computer, I haven't seen a doorknob, I think that stands out. But for the things that we have seen, every now and then we'll come across a stuffed animal that might have been on somebody's desk, pictures that were on people's desks.
Jackie Judd and several other people keep asking us, when you look at where the towers used to stand, there is surprisingly so little rubble. Where did all the rubble go?
It's a very good question, Peter, and I have asked some people who've been doing some of the rescue and recovery work this morning. If you look behind me, you can see the very remains, the skeletal remains of the World Trade Center. And one volunteer, Robert Gerlinski, explained to me the reason there's so little rubble is that all of it simply fell down into the ground and was pulverized, evaporated.
What was that he said? Fell down to the ground, was pulverized, and evaporated. I don't mean to be making fun of these people at all. They're trying to explain what they see. They don't see enough debris. And they're trying to come up with some explanation as to where the building went. Actually, that video clip I saw that day, and that partially inspired the title of the book. Because why did people quit asking that question? Here's another short clip the following day.
I was astonished at the degree to which solid materials were turned into pulverized dust as a consequence of that building collapse. I think it was striking.
People were shocked. It did not make sense how much it was turned to dust.
Seems like that things are being coordinated somehow.
Let's grab the pitchforks and let's go get them.
I don't talk about the buildings as much anymore because, for one, I'm not a physicist. I don't claim to be one. I think she's made basic flaws in physics. Cognitive dissonance? What's that?
One funny thing I think of if only a hurricane had come on 9/11.
You missed that one. This was on 9/11.
I mean, that's fine. I didn't say anything when he brought it up. I don't know her. I know some of the people associated with her got really vicious towards Stephen Jones, professor.
I remember from 3-4 years back that his picture was different. You can see he's changed all the contrast. And he said in his presentation, this was thermite. So what's he doing? Saying, yeah, this is thermite. I'm a physicist. I know what I'm talking about. Don't look at the building turning to dust, which is what's actually happening.
"9/11 was an attack on human consciousness."
You know, Department of Energy funded our research.
You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big. The building collapsed to dust.
We have seemed to have abandoned logic and reason. Do you see that as a trend? And if so, then what in the world can we do to change it? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's an excellent question, and that's spot on correct. It's the biggest problem we encounter. I mean, we are a Skeptic Society as a science organization, and the whole problem of critical thinking is huge in this country. People are swept up by emotions, particularly when it comes to religion and politics. People are emotionally invested in their positions and beliefs. People on the left and the right, Christians, Jews, Muslims, everybody are committed to their positions. That makes it very difficult to think critically and clearly about evidence.
Throughout the month of September, you'll see Rethink 9/11 on subways, billboards, and sides of buses.
We've seen a similar operation going on for the last, let's see, at least, well, for the last 5.5 years, really, almost now, and particularly since 2008, this seems to have accelerated with these groups like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which are essentially, you know, we've now got some evidence that those groups were purely set up to stop people discovering what Dr. Judy Wood has put together and stop them from realizing that it was actually correct. To try and delay that realization for as long as possible.
On bumper stickers, t-shirts, lawn signs, and freeway overpasses, on library bulletin boards, on storefronts, and all over Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Rethink 9/11 is ready to facilitate renewed and growing interest in this highly relevant issue by drawing attention to that lesser-known third tower, a 47-story skyscraper, which was not hit by an airplane but collapsed completely from top to bottom on 9/11.
But 7, you can see the boom, 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 boom.
And Building 7, if you turn all but the bottom 2.5 stories to dust, it would make the seismic signal approximately the same as what was recorded.
I don't know. It's very confusing. I'm an architect, not a seismologist. Sure.
Wait a minute. He's a architect in San Francisco and doesn't have any understanding of seismographs? What's wrong with this picture?
Well, all right. Who should be a prime contractor for doing an investigation of the destruction of a building? Well, that's an easy answer. No. You go to the companies that specialize in PSYOPs and in the development of directed energy weapons. Because that is who they used.
You know, these guys would want us to know what happened and to tell their story.
I've just stayed out of it, okay? And that's basically the end of it.
I thought, you know what, this is low-hanging fruit. If I go after her, I'm going to be accused of just going after the easy arguments.
The internet is very much an information battleground in all kinds of ways, but the people that did 9/11, you know, they've got vast, perhaps even infinite resources, and they're perfectly capable of orchestrating coordinated disinformation groups to flood the internet with meaningless drivel to drown out you've got this signal to noise ratio which they can ramp up, to a very high level of noise so that the signal barely gets through. And we've witnessed this I've certainly witnessed this going in phases where we seem to have periods of relatively good signal strength getting through, and people, seem to be getting the understanding of the information, and then we get a lot of noise coming through, and we're getting, I just read this blog and it said it was mini nukes, and I think it was that, because Jim Fetzer said it was, and
Well, it seems that whoever sets the agenda. Whoever frames the debate and gets information out first are the people that will have the benefit of being first, because then they can get a lot of people believing in what they're saying because they have actually framed the debate, what they want people to believe.
The Judy Wood phenomenon is of that character, Richie, where it's not really a scientific movement so much as it has the characteristics of a cult.
The campaign will empower people worldwide in a way that allows each and every person to participate at any level.
Radioactive isotopes used in small nukes were picked up in levels off the charts in and around the towers.
No, I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
Now,
nukes were not used.
Well, the radiation was picked up. Now,
no, I don't buy it, because when those towers went down, there was less impact than when they brought down the Superdome in Seattle. And there should have been way more. Those towers literally disintegrated. They went into dust. And nukes don't do that. Not at that level. Radiation would have been extremely high.
It appears to have involved a very sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes. If you had them in the core columns, for example, with a destruction radius of 100 feet, then you're pretty much accomplishing what we saw on 9/11.
We're being made into a culture of lies, a people of lies, a country of lies, a nation of lies. And lying kills you. It's a disease. It's very infectious. It's not only infectious, but it's corrosive. And when in the truth movement, what we see is lies being generated and stirred up, and then regenerated and re-stirred up. And finally, what will happen to a culture that's built on lies? They will be completely without any strength whatsoever, won't they?
Rethink 9/11!
All I've seen from Dr. Wood so far is a colorful picture book which continuously stresses the need to look at evidence in order to determine exactly what happened at the World Trade Center.
So your answer is no, you have not read the book, Where Did the Towers Go?
No, I have not read it. I don't own a copy. I would never buy it. I think that she's a distraction. The whole buildings were blown to Kingdom Come. I mean, that much is obvious. Although conventional explosives have been ruled out due to lack of noise and seismic evidence,
I'm like amazed now. 110-story building above us, and I'm looking up at the sun.
All that huge amount of weight above it cascades down, and the floors collapse one after another at real-time speed.
I'm not part of the truth movement. I'm a scientist and a researcher. I conduct research and I write reports. That's what I do. And I conducted a comprehensive forensic investigation, the only one in the public domain, about what happened on 9/11. And if you do any kind of investigation of a crime, the first thing you must do is determine what happened. Before you can determine how it happened, you have to determine what it is. And then who did it. You have to define what it is. And once I had done that, I filed my information with NIST as a request for correction, which caused me to be a whistleblower.
Right.
Qualifying as a whistleblower, I was then eligible to file a federal QTAM case, whistleblower case, which I did. And the defendants in that case were companies that were manufacturers and developers of energy weapons.
Right.
And they also had a contract
with the U.S. government to know everything about any weapon of mass destruction that exists or is being developed anywhere.
Right.
So not only would they know what weapon it was, but whose weapon it was. And they were going to be put under oath if that case went forward. That's the closest we can get to it.
That's absolutely. I was just going to try and add that, but you got there before me, which is great. And so all of that information is available. It's on the websites if you want to go and read it. You know, we only have a certain amount of evidence, and if you want to stick with the evidence, basically we do not have enough evidence to say who, quote unquote, did 9/11. We don't have that yet.
But we know who to ask.
Yeah, we know who to ask. We know who's closer to knowing who did it than we are. And they
would have been put under oath if this case had gone forward. And this case was dismissed from court with the judges actually stating in the written decision that they were ignoring the law to dismiss the case.
That's right. And
it was not dismissed on merit.
We've talked about this many times. You can go onto the websites and listen to other audios, and you can discover all of that information is there. That in itself is now evidence of what we've done to try and move this forward. So, and also this involves energy. It involves energy, and that's what we talk about.
Suppressed.
Yes, yep. and that is in common with the energy technology that's been suppressed, which could change the world.
But all of these little Easter eggs, I call them. It's like laying out Easter eggs for a 3-year-old's Easter egg hunt. You know, they're right out there in the wide open, just waiting to be found.
Exactly, and that's what the 9/11 Truth Movement is that the government planted all of these little Easter eggs, as you call them, and just waited for people to discover them, and then put together and create a truth movement based on all of these things that the government released.
Right, but still, it doesn't get back to the evidence, and it's all sorts of bait to take people away from the evidence.
Exactly.
On the afternoon of 9/11, Van Romero from New Mexico Tech spoke out in some interview he did, saying that, obviously that was controlled demolition. You know, I could just tell. Just take a few bombs to do it. And then 5 days later, as the story goes, 5 days later he retracted it. And then he got $80 million in grant money from the government. And so then the truthers say, that's proof he got paid off. But it turns out that a year before 9/11, he taught a short course at the Directed Energy Professional Society in energy weapons.
Oh.
He knew what he was looking at. Well, like also the first time that Stephen Jones went on Tucker Carlson's show, first of all, how did he, how was he chosen to do that? But anyway, he was on there, and this big deal was made about how they wouldn't play his video of Building 7, so therefore it's important. And it was sold to us. It's sort of, a kind of a negative, a reverse psychology type thing, like force feeding a dog. People want what they can't have. So it brought greater interest to it.
I think what becomes difficult to comprehend, one of the problems is that the cover-up is so enormous, and when you say things, for example, like, you look at a similar comment with Larry Silverstein and the Pullet, the Pullet comment, and to think that he would have made that comment to, stir up people in the truth movement, that doesn't make a lot of sense to people. They just can't believe that you would actually, in other words, you would actually engineer the cover-up to take in the people who are already questioning the official story. They don't see the second and third and fourth layer of this. It's just beyond, the sort of level of comprehension. And then you got people like Alex Jones promoting that clip, and I was taken in by it as well. So I can speak from direct experience, because I believe, as I've said many times when I've done talks like this with folks, I was taken in by the bomb story. When I started to look at stuff, I didn't believe the official story, but I was taken in probably for at least 2 years by the bomb story, and it took me quite a long time to kind of cure myself of that, I suppose, one way of putting it.
Now Abraham was banned because he put on his profile information which we find confuses and distracts people from the evidence that we believe is most solid.
Dr. Wood's research, which has been ongoing since, well, probably about 2004, what she's compiled, as as she said, is irrefutable. So essentially, the only way to muddy the waters is just to insert doubt at every possible opportunity. And there are some very sort of common techniques, which I think I put them all under the umbrella of perception management, whereby instead of using the word evidence, you never use the word evidence, you use the word theory. And this then, immediately changes mischaracterizes it so that a theory, of course, can be debated, to a much greater extent than evidence.
There's a whole lot of evidence and very weird things that happen at the World Trade Center. We don't want every theory out there on our website. There's a whole lot of evidence, theory, evidence. I'm not going to present every piece of evidence out there that I can't explain. We have produced the evidence. I'm not going to present every piece of evidence out there that I can't explain. We have produced the evidence. I'm not going to present every piece of evidence out there that I can't explain.
Now, tell us specifically about the petition that's available for signing by architects and engineers and other supporters at AE911truth.org.
The petition demands of Congress a real investigation
They want a new investigation? Well, read my book. There you go. Yes. If they're calling for a new investigation, what they're doing is admitting that they are not capable of conducting an investigation.
How true.
It would be pretty cool if you guys would interview Dr. Judy Wood sometime about her theory on 9/11.
All right, sir, I thank you for the call. Let's go to Carolyn in Florida. It's unbelievable, man. We're talking about real issues here, and people want to talk about the most Johnny nonsense stuff you can possibly imagine. I'm not even going to get into that what that caller wanted to talk about.
Where exactly would people like the truth to be moved to exactly? Over into this little corner where nobody can see it, which is essentially what they've tried to do, because they've established this truth movement to move the truth out of view. That's what the truth movement has done.
It should be pointed out that Dr. Judy Wood is the only person to initiate court action based on the scientific evidence pertaining to the destruction of the WTC. She is also the only person to complete and publish a comprehensive and independent forensic investigation into the destruction of the WTC. It seems that the conclusions of this forensic investigation are so important that whole organizations who claim to be oriented around truthful, open investigations have been tasked with covering up, muddling up, and attempting to discredit this research.
And going back to Dr. Wood's book, it's very dangerous to the powers that be for several reasons. One is because it unravels 9/11 in terms of what happened to the World Trade Center complex completely and conclusively. When you've read the book, you know that the only explanation is directed energy weapon of some kind, and you know the characteristics that weapon system has. But what's in Dr. Wood's book, when you've been through it and you've seen how it's constructed and how the data is put together, it actually changes the way that you think, and that's even more dangerous to the powers that be, because once you adapt and change your mode of thinking, then it's like building up an armory. You become resistant to psychological operations, or you become more resistant to it. If you truly study what's in that book and you truly kind of take it into your understanding, and your way of thinking, then you can begin to see that you're surrounded by psychological operations. It's just everywhere you look.
And if you hear this shouting, it's a group of demonstrators who've come.
9/11 was an inside job. Oh, get a life. Get a life. 9/11 was an inside job. I think these demonstrators are all into restroom gay sex.
Wow, this is like a weird academic fight.
Nobody knows what Judy Wood is talking about.
And Fleischman was asked if he regretted anything. And he said, yes, I regret allowing my colleagues, or my competitor, to call this cold fusion. It's a low energy nuclear reaction.
Right.
It was called cold fusion in the same way that my work is called space beams.
Oh, okay, I see.
And it was by the same person.
So in other words, when you give something a certain name, that's part of the perception management process.
Yes, indeed.
I would say that people like Stephen E. Jones, if you go and look at the evidence of what he's tried to do with this data and this evidence, if you look at what he's actually done, he is essentially set back cold fusion phenomena research or low energy nuclear reactions research by 20 years.
Yes.
And then if you listen to Pons and Fleischman, by the end of the 1990s, they had sustained reactions going on in their experimental setup. They were funded by Toyota. I think they got their funding pulled.
Yeah.
So I blame people like Stephen E. Jones for what happened at Fukushima, because there is no need for us to be using that technology, and many other people have said this.
I agree,
I think
absolutely.
if you couple together what Dr. Wood has unfolded in the study of the World Trade Center destruction, you can see the energy phenomena is real, you can clearly see that it's linked to cold fusion, and you can see the players that are involved. And so somebody has got that knowledge, somebody has engineered that physics, because what happened.
Yes.
That's not a theory. What happened.
What was measured at the World Trade Center was definitely above background levels, 50 times background levels. There was tritium there. Now, why?
And then I'm attacked everywhere for just sticking to what I think is the most important evidence of prior knowledge and involvement. There's your answer.
This is a game that you're playing.
I'm really not playing a game.
We now reach so many millions of people that the haters are the ones that are always going to call in first. And what that does is then distort what we're covering. They're going to call in about chupacabras. They're going to call in about space beams.
I know she's a psyop.
No, what is the psyop?
Look at how many people have gotten talking about space lasers
hold on a second.
and get completely written
space
off
laser
and discredited.
beam. Sure.
I know she's a psyop.
No, what is the psyop?
Look at how many people have gotten talking about space lasers
hold on a second.
and get completely written
space
off
laser
and discredited.
beam. Sure. You sound like Alex Jones. Hold on.
If you're sending a beam of laser from space, you've got to have an enormous energy source in space to do that. And that's been looked at. It's tough. It's a tough problem. It's almost ruled out there. I don't think we have such a weapon. Thank goodness.
They try to equate the evidence as though it's an opinion, and if it's an opinion, then if they discredit the opinion giver or whatever, then that's the way they cover up the evidence. That's why the book, the way I wrote it, it empowers the reader It's totally independent of me. The reader reads the book. They understand the evidence firsthand. They take ownership of that information. And so what if I get smeared? That doesn't change the evidence. They could kill me off. Fine. The evidence is still there. Mm-hmm. And that's what needs to get dealt with. And if somebody is distracting away from the evidence, red flag.
Dr. Judy, have you ever written in the book space beams? Ever?
No, nor have I ever used that term.
So we're meant to believe
one woman who wrote this book trying to convince everyone that it's space lasers that brought down the World Trade Center.
Foil.
We have the videotapes. The firefighters reporting molten metal like a slurry or a steel mill or a volcano. Those are quotes. Giant pools.
What about the pictures of them dragging oxygen hoses all over the steaming supposed hot metal? If it were that hot, you wouldn't dare do that, would you?
Well, we do have the infrared photos of the molten metal.
Well, again, what melted the metal? Was it heat?
That's a very good question. It's also one of the first times I've heard Alex Jones speechless. Here's this famous USGS image that folks say is evidence that it was high heat. They claim that at point E, it was 819 degrees Fahrenheit. Water boils at 212 Fahrenheit. This guy doesn't look like a boiled chicken. The buildings were not vaporized. Vaporization implies heat.
Will involve, I guess the term you use is dustification of metal, or the vaporization of the metal in the towers, one or the other.
The buildings were not vaporized. Vaporization implies heat.
She thinks that there was this beam weapon pointed at the Twin Towers that somehow vaporized the steel.
The buildings were not vaporized. Vaporization implies heat.
Also, because of the evidence of lack of high heat, you can eliminate the explanation of some kind of thermal energy weapon as the mechanism of distraction. So that right there eliminates laser beams from space.
Dr. Wood says maybe there's a beam of laser or microwave from space or something that came down and...
So that right there eliminates laser beams from space.
We also have Judy Wood with her theory that a space laser destroyed the World Trade Center.
He said they should call the group something like Liars for Truth.
Yeah. If anyone really wants an investigation, please read this book. It is the most important book I've ever read in my entire life. And just take it for yourself and please just read it.
Thanks, Abraham.
And Where Did the Towers Go by Dr. Judy Wood, please. Like, we're all on the same team.
Appreciate that very much. Next question.
Stay away from this book.
I have recommended hundreds of books over the years.
Here when the goal live will go.
Basically, guerrilla information warfare.
Anybody want this?
Target of opportunity.
When they go back to the middle. What are you going to say?
We're just going to chant that 9/11 is an inside job.
Could thermite do that?
I don't know.
Fessinger showed that people will actively avoid situations or information that might challenge those beliefs and values in order to avoid dissonance.
9/11 was an attack on human consciousness.
It's simple. Go to rethink911.org right now and donate to your city. Share this ambitious campaign with everyone you know, and together, let's change the course of history.
They're always keeping them occupied, so any door is good as long as it isn't the evidence.
We have over 19,000 other individuals joining us, demanding a real investigation based on the specific evidence, the scientific evidence for explosive controlled demolition. At all three World Trade Center skyscrapers on 9/11.
Well, when you look at 7, that's a conventional controlled demolition.
No, it isn't. No, it was not either. Because you got to read the book, Where Did the Towers Go, by Dr. Judy Wood, BS, MS, and PhD.
No, I know who she is.
I just finished her book. It's very remarkable.
People who recognize that something wasn't right on 9/11, they thought they were clever. And so they joined the truth movement, and they're getting pats in the back. Yeah, you're clever. You figured out the official story's wrong. Aren't you wonderful? But they don't go beyond that because they think they're thinking. Yeah. They're not really thinking.